Hey friends, in this video I'm going to share with you how to go from knowing better to actually doing better with grace and respect to the process. I think that a lot of us get these ideas in our heads. I know that I did in particular, that change and growth is like a light switch, and have these really unreasonable expectations that once you know better, once you learn a piece of new information, a new way of doing things, that you should automatically be able to do better. And that's not true. And that can really get you wrapped up in some unhealthy cycles of shaming and shitting on yourself. And that never helps the process. I can tell you that from experience. So, how do we do it differently? How do we gently integrate these new ideas into our bodies, into our lives, to be able to move forward in the ways that we want to? So, the first thing we can start thinking about is start considering yourself not just as one like ultimate human being, but start considering your feelings as parts. This has been so helpful for me in learning how to feel my feelings and kind of build the inner relationship with myself. So when you're making any types of changes in your life, as much as you consciously want them, there are unconscious parts of yourself, which are essentially attached to like inner child parts in your feelings, that are actually going to be resisting it. And you don't really realize that this is all going on behind the scenes. You're just like, I know better. I want this new thing. I want to function better. But we have to realize that these parts behind the scenes, the subconscious parts, have been running the show on autopilot since we were children, right? These unhealthy coping mechanisms that we have, these ways of thinking and being in our lives, although you might start to be realizing that they no longer serve you and they're actually kind of going against who and how you want to be today, we need to kind of catch these parts up with our current self. We need to like get them on board so that they're no longer holding us back. That's the resistance that you feel. It's these wars, these internal wars that you don't realize are going on inside of yourself with conflicting parts, the parts of you that want to move forward and the parts of you that want to remain the same. And that can be really challenging to navigate, right? And this is where I think that some of that shaming and shoulding and like frustration comes about, where you're like, I know better. I should be able to do this. Well, not necessarily. So this is where you can learn to give yourself grace. You can do a little bit of inner work. You can start getting curious about the resistance. Start getting curious about the parts of yourself that are unconsciously holding you back. Okay? And by getting curious instead of judging them or yourself, you can actually start diving a little bit deeper and unpacking some of these things so that you can change them. You can start to understand maybe how and why the old coping mechanisms or old ways that you're trying to release and doing something different actually once served you. Generally, they were ways in which we functioned in childhood, in an attempt to, how do I want to say this? They usually have to do with themes of safety and feeling like we had to earn love or prove our worth. I think a lot of these subconscious ways of thinking and being are attached to those types of ideas anyways. So you can start getting curious how these things once served you, what they once meant for you, how they were helping you. And then you can gently reparent them and catch them up to where you are now. You can start getting curious, okay, well, that helped me feel safe and worthy and loved. It no longer serves me. How can I feel that safety, love, and worth inside of me and connect and soothe this part so that they will allow me to move forward now with this change that I want. I hope that that makes sense. If you've done any kind of inner child healing or any kind of parts work, I think you'll understand what I'm saying. So we kind of want to befriend these parts of ourselves instead of actually push them away and shame them and judge them. Okay? Like, our bodies and our minds are actually very smart. And if you consider them as survival systems, a lot of times these things make a lot more sense. We have to remember that the human body and the human mind aren't wired for happiness and growth and like expansion and change. Although we might want those things now as we learn and grow, we have to remember that we're wired in certain ways for safety and survival. Into some of these parts in our egos, that means sameness, that means familiar, even when the familiar and the same old thing isn't what we want anymore. So I hope that that helps kind of give you some perspective on how you can work with yourself and give yourself grace, and understand that there will be a little bit of back and forth in the process between knowing better and actively being able to do better. So the first thing we can do is learn to make friends with these parts, get curious about them, understand kind of how they were protecting us, and maybe how we can do it differently moving forward that feels good to both of you. Okay? And then also understanding that change and growth is not just a light switch. You don't just flip it once and you're always in the new from here on out. There's actually a process that goes on for the embodiment piece of the changes that you're trying to make in your life. And I like to think of it as going from a shift from knowing in your head to like a knowing in your heart, like a deeper knowing in your body. It's integrated in you on a deeper level. And this requires patience and repetition, because that's how we learn anything. Going from a new idea to an ingrained behavior or habit, it's just repetition. It's really that simple. So we have to understand that between knowing better and doing better, there's actually like a bunch of steps in there that we don't really realize. I remember seeing it on some sort of graph that, I'm not going to say it perfectly now, but basically it goes from some sort of knowing to you setting the intention to you starting to make changes in your behavior. And then more regularly, changes in your behavior will lead to new habits. And then those habits eventually lead to a new way of life, just kind of a part of who you are. So there's all these steps in between that we have to go through. And I know for myself, finally realizing that and accepting that as part of this process really helped me have more grace for myself. It cut down on a lot of the personal judgment I had. Why can't I just do better? I know better. Well, I wasn't able to just flip the switch and do better. I had to go through the process. I had to make peace with my parts and catch them up to where we are and kind of do some reparenting on that aspect. So all in all, these things are a process, and I hope that you learn to give yourself a little bit more grace, and that it doesn't deter you so much anymore, right? We don't need to somehow internalize our inability to just jump from one phase to the other as some sort of failure on our part. It's not some sort of like character flaw, right? It's not because you're not motivated or not good enough or anything like that. It's just a process. It is what it is. And if you start digging a little bit deeper, doing some of the inner work along with letting it happen in its divine timing, like not being in such a rush to just flip that switch, I promise you the whole process will happen a little bit easier, and it won't feel so forced. We don't need to be forcing and shaming ourselves into change, right? That doesn't feel good. It makes you wonder kind of what's wrong with you and why you even started in the first place. And that's not the types of energies and intentions that we want behind these self-improvement, self-development kind of things, because you're not a self-improvement project, right? You're allowed to change and to grow and to evolve. And also you're allowed to still love who you are and have grace for yourself throughout the process of becoming. So I hope that helps. I hope that you're able to implement some of these ideas moving forward to lighten up the process a little bit, right? It doesn't have to be so heavy. We can find a little bit more balance instead of just rampaging forward. So I hope you have a beautiful day and this beautiful life, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.